Hello, weary traveller. Tonight, as the world settles into slumber, we embark on a journey into one of the 20th century's most enduring enigmas, the Dyatlov Pass incident. Before we drift too far, if these stories help you unwind, a gentle nod by liking and subscribing would be greatly appreciated. And please, in the comments below, share where you are in the world and what time it is for you. Let's create a shared moment of calm connection. Chapter 1. The Ascent of Youth and Ambition. You find yourself transported not into a dark forest, but into the vibrant, hopeful heart of a bustling Soviet university town in the late 1950s. The air here, though crisp with the approaching winter, still carries the scent of ambition, of shared meals in student canteens, and the faint, exciting aroma of freshly printed textbooks mixed with cheap tobacco. This isn't the grim, forbidding landscape of the mystery just yet, but the warm, human context that makes the coming tragedy all the more poignant. Imagine the murmur of young voices, the clinking of glasses, the easy laughter that bounces off stone walls in the Ural Polytechnic Institute. This was a time of grand aspirations in the Soviet Union, a period of rebuilding and looking forward, where space race dreams filled the air and young people were encouraged to embrace adventure, to conquer nature, to push the boundaries of human endurance. These hikers, in their own way, embodied that spirit. Their journey a microcosm of a nation striving for greatness, confident in its ability to overcome any obstacle. The collective spirit of the Komsomol, the Young Communist League, permeated student life, fostering a sense of duty, physical prowess, and a deep connection to the vastness of the Soviet land. Their expedition was not just a personal quest, it was, in a way, an affirmation of national vigor and the spirit of exploration, a demonstration of collective strength and the ability to overcome formidable natural challenges. The echoes of a hopeful future seemed to ripple through their energetic discussions and plans. Our story begins with Igor Dyatlov, a young man of 23, whose very name would eventually become synonymous with one of history's most chilling unsolved puzzles. But here, now, he is simply Igor, bright, organized, a natural leader, with a quiet intensity in his eyes. He is an experienced hiker, a veteran of challenging treks, his mind always planning the next, more ambitious expedition, his gaze constantly searching for the next peak to conquer, the next river to ford, the next untouched vista. Around him, a group forms, drawn by his steady hand and the allure of adventure, by his reputation for meticulous planning and daring spirit, a charisma that quietly inspired confidence. They are all students or recent graduates from the Institute, brimming with the optimism and resilience that defined their generation, their faces eager and full of life, ready to tackle any hardship. You can almost feel the collective energy of these young people, their boundless enthusiasm for the wild, untamed beauty of their homeland, their camaraderie palpable as they shared dreams of grand expeditions under the vast Soviet sky. There was a particular kind of bond formed in these student outdoor clubs, a camaraderie forged through shared challenges and a deep respect for the unforgiving beauty of the Soviet wilderness, an understanding that safety lay in unity and preparation. They were not just friends, they were a unit, a meticulously chosen team, each member bringing their own specific skills and temperament to the group, forming a cohesive whole ready to face the elements,
a testament to careful selection and collective strength. Consider the meticulous preparation that went into such an undertaking.
This wasn't a casual stroll. It was a Category 3 expedition, the most difficult classification for winter trekking in the Soviet system, requiring considerable skill, endurance, and planning. A test of both physical and mental fortitude at the highest level. You can almost smell the faint tang of new canvas from their tent, its heavy weave promising protection, an almost earthy, clean scent, the sharp scent of wood polish on their skis, sleek and ready for the snow, and the earthy aroma of packed food rations, dried meat, hardened bread, perhaps some sweetened condensed milk, precious and fortifying sustenance for the arduous journey. They spent weeks, months even, poring over maps, tracing lines across contours of remote mountain ranges, debating routes, calculating supplies down to the last gram, and discussing contingency plans for every imaginable scenario, from minor injuries to unexpected blizzards. Imagine the scratch of pencils on paper, the rustle of large-scale maps unfolding on a communal table, perhaps an old wooden one scarred by countless hours of student study, its surface smooth from use, the low hum of excited discussion late into the night, fueled by hot tea and shared anticipation, plans meticulously laid. Their boots, though sturdy, were already softened from previous journeys, their thick wool socks already bearing the faint, familiar scent of past adventures, testament to countless miles traversed and countless challenges overcome. Every piece of equipment, from the sturdy axes used for cutting firewood and ice to the heavy wool blankets, was carefully chosen for its durability and reliability in extreme conditions, each item serving a vital purpose, a small part of their larger survival strategy. The weight of their rucksacks was substantial, filled with essentials for a multi-week trek, a physical burden willingly borne in exchange for the freedom and challenge of the wilderness, a badge of their adventurous spirit. Their boots, though sturdy, were already softened from previous journeys, their thick wool socks already bearing the faint, familiar scent of past adventures, testament to countless miles traversed and countless challenges overcome. Every piece of equipment, from the sturdy axes used for cutting firewood and ice to the heavy wool blankets, was carefully chosen for its durability and reliability in extreme conditions, each item serving a vital purpose, a small part of their larger survival strategy. The weight of their rucksacks was substantial, filled with essentials for a multi-week trek, a physical burden willingly borne in exchange for the freedom and challenge of the wilderness, a badge of their adventurous spirit. The very act of preparing was a ritual, a bonding experience, solidifying their shared purpose and mutual reliance, a quiet commitment to each other's safety and success. The team was a microcosm of their world, a blend of different personalities united by a shared passion. There was Lyudmila Dubinina, 21, known for her sharp wit and her determination, a talented skier who sometimes challenged Dyatlov's decisions with a spirited debate, embodying the youthful confidence of the era. Her presence added a lively dynamic to the group, her quick observations often cutting through the earnest seriousness, bringing a spark of youthful exuberance. Alexander Kolevatov, 24, quiet and thoughtful, with a reputation for being exceptionally reliable, a meticulous planner who double-checked everything, his calm demeanor a steadying influence when spirits might falter. Zinaida Kolmogorova, 22, vibrant and energetic, a keen diarist whose words would later offer fleeting, precious glimpses into their last days. Her entries filled with observations on the landscape and the group's dynamics, painting a picture of mundane daily life before the horror, a testament to her keen eye and reflective nature, capturing the fleeting moments of joy and hardship. Rustem Slobodin, 23, strong and athletic, a man of few words but steady resolve, often the one to break trail through deep snow, his quiet strength a comforting presence in arduous conditions. Georgy Krivonischenko, 23, and Yuri Doroshenko, 21, inseparable friends, both known for their good humor and their physical prowess, often the source of laughter and light-hearted banter around the campfire, their bond unbreakable, a warm core in the cold expanse. Then there was Nicolas Thibeaux-Brignolles, 23, a skilled engineer, whose presence added a layer of practical expertise, a quiet intellectual who could fix almost anything, always tinkering, always observing, providing technical solutions to wilderness problems. And finally, Semyon Zolotaryov, 38, the oldest and most enigmatic of the group, a military veteran with a somewhat mysterious past, his face bearing the scars of earlier conflicts, his experience a valuable asset that Dyatlov seemed to value, despite Zolotaryov being somewhat of an outsider to the student circle, older and perhaps a bit more reserved. He was a seasoned guide, a man who had seen conflict, and his presence lent a sense of serious, almost grim, capability to the expedition, a foil to the youthful exuberance of the others, a quiet, watchful presence. The diverse skills and temperaments of this group were precisely what made them so formidable in the wilderness, a unit capable of facing severe challenges with a blend of youthful vigor and seasoned caution. One member, Yuri Yudin, would turn back due to illness early in the journey. He would forever be the solitary survivor, marked by the circumstances that set him apart. Think of him now, walking away, experiencing the onset of his illness, a persistent cough perhaps a little disappointed to miss the adventure, utterly unaware that this simple illness was saving his life, a twist of fate that granted him survival. The snow beneath his feet, the sound of his own heavy breathing, the distant shouts of his friends waving goodbye. These seemingly ordinary moments held a profound significance that would only be revealed in the future, etched into his memory with a stark clarity. He carried with him the heavy memory of their last farewell, the casual assurances of their return, a burden that would stay with him for the rest of their long life, shaping his perspective and casting a shadow over his every memory of that fateful winter, a survivor's guilt that never truly faded. The contrast between his mundane ailment and their ultimate horrific end is a poignant reminder of fate's arbitrary hand, a cruel juxtaposition of the ordinary and the utterly extraordinary, a twist of destiny that defies understanding. Their objective was Ortaton, a mountain whose name, in the local Mansi language, translates chillingly to "Don't go there," or Wind Mountain. It was a formidable peak, offering a true test of their capabilities, and promising unparalleled views for those who reached its summit, a symbol of their mountaineering ambition and their desire to conquer the untamed wild. The journey began on January 25, 1959, by train to Ivdel, then by truck to Vizhai, the last inhabited settlement. Here, the last vestiges of civilization slowly faded behind them, replaced by the encroaching wilderness, its silence growing with every mile. The scent of wood smoke from village chimneys, the distant barks of dogs, the sound of human voices, all began to recede, replaced by the vast encompassing silence of the wilderness,
broken only by the natural sounds of wind and snow and the creak of their own footsteps. They carried letters from home, small tokens of affection, and the collective hopes of their families, none of whom could have imagined the chilling fate awaiting them in the remote, snowy expanse, a tragedy yet to unfold. The transition from the familiar sounds and sights of human settlement to the stark, untamed wild was a gradual process, but by Vizhai they were truly on their own, dependent only on themselves and their carefully prepared equipment, crossing a threshold into the unknown.
Imagine the crisp, biting air as they stepped off the truck in Vizhay, the snow thick and undisturbed, stretching endlessly in every direction, glittering under the pale winter sun, a blinding expanse of white. The only sounds now were the crunch of their boots on the packed snow, the rhythmic swish of their skis slicing through the powder, and the steady, determined rhythm of their own breathing, punctuated by the occasional call or laugh that was quickly swallowed by the vastness. They were entering a world of stark white beauty, where towering pine trees stood silent sentinels, their branches heavy with snow, their dark silhouettes stark against the endless white, like ancient guardians. The light was often low and diffused, painting the landscape in shades of white and grey, sometimes pierced by the dazzling glare of sun on untouched powder, creating a disorienting, featureless canvas that swallowed distances and distorted perception. This was the wilderness they loved, a place where they felt truly alive, pushed to their limits, connected to the raw power of nature, a place where human ingenuity and endurance were truly tested against the elements. They were experienced, yes, but the mountains hold secrets, and the Urals in particular have a way of revealing them only to those who get too close, drawing them deeper into its silent, ancient embrace, a perilous allure. The biting cold was a constant companion, a physical presence, but it was also a familiar challenge, one they felt equipped to conquer, wrapped as they were in layers of sturdy wool and down, their bodies already accustomed to the rigor and demands of such an expedition. As they began their trek, the initial days would have been filled with the camaraderie of shared effort, the rhythm of skiing, one foot after the other, pulling their heavy packs, the creak of the leather straps, the sound of their skis slicing through the fresh snow, a monotonous but comforting beat, a rhythm of progress. Evenings would have brought the simple, profound comfort of a crackling campfire, its warmth a tangible shield against the encroaching cold, its flames dancing against the encroaching darkness, casting dancing shadows. The smell of pine smoke would cling to their clothes, a comforting scent that spoke of safety and companionship, of shared moments in the wild, an aroma of survival. Imagine the low murmur of conversations, the sharing of stories, the planning for the next day's route, all bathed in the flickering orange glow of the flames, casting long, dancing shadows on the snow, creating a temporary, intimate world. The taste of hot tea, perhaps, brewed over the fire, its warmth spreading through their chilled bodies, or a meagre but satisfying meal, eaten quickly to retain warmth, its vapor rising into the frigid air, a brief moment of warmth in the vast cold, a small victory against the elements. The sky above would be a canvas of endless stars, so bright and sharp in the remote mountain air they felt close enough to touch, twinkling like diamonds on velvet, silent observers to their cheerful endeavors, a reminder of the immense, indifferent cosmos watching from above.
The sounds of their laughter, their songs, their jokes would have echoed faintly in the vast, empty landscape, tiny sparks of human warmth against an immense, indifferent world, a brief, beautiful symphony before the silence that would later descend. The first few days were relatively uneventful, a steady progression through the forest, then into more open, windswept terrain, their path rising steadily. They followed a well-established route, but soon they would venture beyond the familiar, pushing into areas less frequently traversed, where the maps grew sparser and the landscape more challenging, a true test of their pioneering spirit. The sky above would be a canvas of endless stars, so bright and sharp in the remote mountain air they felt close enough to touch, twinkling like diamonds on velvet, silent observers to their cheerful endeavors, a reminder of the immense, indifferent cosmos watching from above. The sounds of their laughter, their songs, their jokes would have echoed faintly in the vast, empty landscape, tiny sparks of human warmth against an immense, indifferent world, a brief, beautiful symphony before the silence that would later descend. The first few days were relatively uneventful, a steady progression through the forest, then into more open, windswept terrain, their path rising steadily. They followed a well-established route, but soon they would venture beyond the familiar, pushing into areas less frequently traversed, where the maps grew sparser and the landscape more challenging, a true test of their pioneering spirit.
The temperature would have dropped steadily, from perhaps just below freezing during the day to well into the negatives at night, the cold becoming a more dominant, pervasive presence, seeping into every pore. Their heavy wool clothing, layers upon layers, would have provided insulation, but the cold would have been a constant, gnawing presence, seeping into their bones, an ever-present reminder of their vulnerability, a subtle ache that never fully receded, even when active. The world around them would grow quieter, the sounds of distant life fading, leaving only the whisper of the wind, the rustle of snow, and the steady thud of their own heartbeats, a profound, almost spiritual stillness that bordered on oppressive. The feeling of the icy air filling their lungs with each deep breath, the subtle numbness in their fingers and toes, the constant battle to keep circulation flowing. This was the everyday reality of a winter expedition, a challenge they met with resilience and well-practiced routine, a test of their very being. They were young, strong, and prepared. They had maps, compasses, axes, medical supplies, and food. They had trained for this. They had faced harsh conditions before, seen the worst of winter's fury, and emerged victorious, confident in their abilities. Their experience was not just academic, it was lived, etched into their very bodies through countless previous treks. Their muscles hardened, their minds sharpened by the demands of survival in unforgiving landscapes. Yet something happened in that remote pass, something that would tear apart their careful preparations, something that would defy logic and leave seasoned investigators bewildered for decades, a true anomaly that resisted all explanation. The stage was set, not for a triumph of human endurance, but for a chilling, inexplicable disappearance, a narrative woven from terror and silence that would forever haunt the region. Just let yourself settle into the quiet of the mountain air. Feel the imaginary cold on your skin and prepare for the silence to deepen, to become profound, heavy with unspoken dread. This initial tranquility is merely the prelude, the calm before an unimaginable storm, a stark contrast to the terror that would soon engulf them, leaving behind only questions and an enduring mystery. Chapter 2: The Eerie Silence of the Last Camp. You are now immersed deeper into the heart of the journey, moving past the initial days of shared effort and into the challenging, unforgiving landscape of the northern Urals. Imagine the relentless physical exertion that defined their days. Each step on skis through deep, untouched snow, pulling heavy sledges loaded with supplies, was a conscious act of will, a rhythmic push and glide that became almost meditative in its monotony, demanding immense stamina and relentless determination. You can almost feel the burning in their leg muscles, the ache in their shoulders from the weight of their packs, the slight sting of frostnip on exposed skin, even through layers of clothing, a constant nagging reminder of the bitter cold that permeated everything. The air is so cold now that each breath feels sharp, a tiny blade in your lungs, visible as a plume of white mist that instantly dissipates into the vastness, a tangible sign of the frigid air, emphasizing the immense thermal difference between their bodies and the environment, a stark reminder of their vulnerability. The silence of the deep snow, broken only by their rhythmic movements and the crunch of their gear, would have been profound, almost deafening in its vastness, a blanket that swallowed sound and made the world feel utterly empty, save for their presence. By January 31st, the group had reached the edge of a highland area, having established a food storage depot in the forest, lightening their loads for the final push towards Ottorton. The collaborative effort of driving in the poles, their hands stiff with cold and fumbling, securing the guy ropes against the relentless wind that threatened to rip the tent from their grasp before it was even fully erected, a race against nature's fury. Their gloved hands, clumsy with cold, working methodically, efficiently, driven by the sheer urgency to get out of the biting wind, to create a fragile bubble of warmth and shelter, a temporary sanctuary against the raging storm, a desperate race against the clock of hypothermia. The sounds of their grunts of exertion, the muffled thud of a snow shovel digging into packed snow, the sharp snap of a tent pole slotting into place, the frantic adjustments as the wind threatened to tear the fabric, a desperate battle against an invisible assailant that was the relentless wind. Every movement was slow, deliberate, a battle against the elements that seemed determined to prevent them from establishing even this fragile refuge, a defiant act against the mountain's indifference. Inside the tent, once erected, the atmosphere would have shifted from grueling outdoor struggle to a sense of fragile relief, a momentary respite from the howling chaos outside. The immediate task was survival, and they set about preparing for the night, establishing their routines as quickly as possible, clinging to the familiar comfort of their rituals. You might imagine the faint smell of melting snow as they used a small stove or candle to melt ice for drinking water, its warmth providing a momentary comfort in the frigid interior, a tiny beacon in the vast cold, sending tendrils of steam into the icy air, a hint of life. The soft glow of a lantern or a flashlight casting long dancing shadows on the canvas walls, making the cramped space feel momentarily cozy, even intimate, a small bubble of humanity in the vast wilderness, a brief illusion of security. They were aiming for a saddle between two peaks, Kholat Syakhl, known as Dead Mountain in Mansi, and the very mountain they sought to conquer, Ottorton. The names themselves, steeped in local folklore and ancient warnings passed down through generations, held a haunting resonance that would only become apparent in retrospect,
adding an eerie, almost premonitory layer to the unfolding tragedy. The subtle shifts in wind direction, the slight but continuous drop in temperature, the gathering heavy clouds that obscured the horizon, all would have been keenly observed by these experienced trekkers, signaling the impending change, yet they pressed on, perhaps feeling the urgency of their timeline. As they ascended, the wind picked up, a low, mournful howl that seemed to carry ancient warnings across the vast empty expanse, growing in intensity, becoming a palpable physical presence that pushed against them. Snow began to fall more heavily, obscuring their visibility, turning the world into a swirling vortex of white, a disorienting, suffocating blizzard that reduced visibility to mere feet, making navigation treacherous. The temperature plummeted further, each degree a physical assault on exposed skin, numbing fingers and toes, even through layers of wool and thick gloves, making fine motor skills difficult, their bodies stiffening with the cold. The sound of the wind was no longer a gentle whisper, but a roaring torrent, a ceaseless, deafening howl that seemed to strip away all other sounds, capable of tearing at their clothing, stealing their breath, and distorting their perception of direction, making it impossible to see more than a few feet ahead, or to hear each other speak without shouting against the gale. You can almost hear the frantic whipping of their tent fabric, the creak and groan of their ski poles as they fought against the wind's invisible force, the muffled shouts of communication lost in the gale, swallowed by the roar of the storm. The very air itself felt thick with finely ground snow particles scratching against their faces, seeping into every tiny crevice of their clothing, making it feel like sandpaper against their skin, a constant, abrasive assault. Somewhere around 5 p.m. on February 1st, they made the decision to pitch their tent. They had miscalculated slightly, or perhaps the deteriorating visibility had caused them to veer off course in the blinding whiteout, losing their exact bearings. Instead of reaching the lower, more sheltered saddle, they found themselves on the eastern slope of Kholat Syakhl, approximately 300 meters from the summit, a notoriously exposed position. It was an exposed position, vulnerable to the full fury of the elements, directly in the path of the raging wind and potential snowdrifts. But in a whiteout, finding a better spot might have been impossible, or perhaps they simply thought they could weather the storm here, confident in their equipment and their collective resilience, having faced similar conditions before and emerged victorious. The snow was deep, drifted by the wind into treacherous cornices and deceptive hollows, making every step uncertain, every surface unstable underfoot. The very ground beneath their feet, seemingly solid, held unseen dangers, a shifting, treacherous landscape, waiting to betray them. Imagine the painstaking effort required to set up camp in such conditions, first stamping down the snow to create a relatively flat platform, a laborious process, each stamp a struggle against the deep, heavy powder, their muscles burning from the exertion, their breath pluming. Then the careful unfurling of the heavy canvas tent, its fabric stiff with cold, resisting their efforts, flapping wildly in the wind, threatening to rip from their grasp. The collaborative effort of driving in the poles, their hands stiff with cold and fumbling, securing the guy ropes against the relentless wind that threatened to rip the tent from their grasp before it was even fully erected, a race against nature's fury. Their gloved hands, clumsy with cold, working methodically, efficiently, driven by the sheer urgency to get out of the biting wind, to create a fragile bubble of warmth and shelter, a temporary sanctuary against the raging storm, a desperate race against the clock of hypothermia.
the sounds of their grunts of exertion, the muffled thud of a snow shovel digging into packed snow, the sharp snap of a tent pole slotting into place, the frantic adjustments as the wind threatened to tear the fabric, a desperate battle against an invisible assailant that was the relentless wind. Every movement was slow, deliberate, a battle against the elements that seemed determined to prevent them from establishing even this fragile refuge, a defiant act against the mountain's indifference. Inside the tent, once erected, the atmosphere would have shifted from grueling outdoor struggle to a sense of fragile relief, a momentary respite from the howling chaos outside. The immediate task was survival, and they set about preparing for the night, establishing their routines as quickly as possible, clinging to the familiar comfort of their rituals. You might imagine the faint smell of melting snow as they used a small stove or candle to melt ice for drinking water, its warmth providing a momentary comfort in the frigid interior, a tiny beacon in the vast cold, sending tendrils of steam into the icy air, a hint of life. The soft glow of a lantern or a flashlight, casting long dancing shadows on the canvas walls, making the cramped space feel momentarily cozy, even intimate, a small bubble of humanity in the vast wilderness, a brief illusion of security. They would have removed their outer layers, perhaps some of their boots, eager to escape the damp chill and let their feet breathe. The rough wool of their inner socks clinging to their skin, releasing pent-up moisture that would soon freeze. The floor of the tent would be covered with their sleeping bags, made of wool and down, promising a degree of warmth, a cocoon against the deepening cold, the soft rustle of fabric as they settled in, seeking rest after their arduous day. Food would have been prepared and shared, perhaps a simple hot gruel made from oats or dried meat, sustenance more than luxury, but welcome nonetheless, its warmth spreading through their chilled bodies, a basic comfort. The clinking of metal mugs, the quiet chewing, the sense of shared accomplishment after a hard day's trek, a moment of profound, simple contentment that comes from overcoming physical challenge. Zinaida Kolmogorova's diary entry for that day, the very last one, records, "It's difficult to imagine such a comfort somewhere in the wilderness. It's almost heaven on earth." A poignant observation, given what would transpire just hours later, a heartbreaking testament to their brief moment of perceived safety, a chilling irony in hindsight. The sounds of conversation would have been low, perhaps recounting the day's challenges, speculating on tomorrow's weather, or simply enjoying the peaceful exhaustion that comes after strenuous physical activity, their voices soft against the drumming of the wind outside, a constant, relentless presence that never truly faded. The air inside, though cold, would have held the faint smell of their bodies, of damp wool, and perhaps the metallic tang of their own breath crystallizing in the air, forming tiny ice crystals on the fabric around their faces, a constant reminder of the extreme temperatures they inhabited. The very act of breathing was a conscious effort in the frigid, still air, their lungs aching slightly with each inhalation. But despite the perceived comfort, the mountain would have continued its subtle assault, a slow, insidious pressure building from outside, an unseen hand pressing upon their fragile shelter. The wind would have buffeted the tent constantly, a relentless drumming against the canvas, a reminder of the hostile world outside, a ceaseless roar that permeated their very consciousness, making conversation difficult and sleep elusive, a constant unsettling background noise.
The temperature inside the tent, even with bodies huddled together and perhaps a small heat source, would have remained well below freezing, never truly warming to a comfortable level, the cold seeping into every fiber of their being. You can almost feel the stiffness in your limbs, the chill that seeps into your sleeping bag, the constant awareness of the cold, even in sleep, a pervasive numbness that never truly leaves, a quiet battle fought on multiple fronts against the insidious elements. The air would be heavy with the scent of bodies, damp wool, and the faint metallic tang of their own breath crystallizing in the air, forming tiny ice crystals on the fabric around their faces, a constant reminder of the extreme frigidity. The very act of breathing was a conscious effort in the frigid, still air, their lungs aching slightly with each inhalation, a testament to the harsh environment. This was their last known position, a small, fragile encampment carved into the vast, indifferent expanse of Kholat Syakhl, a tiny spark of life against an immense, dark canvas. They were experienced, yes, but isolated, miles from any human habitation, utterly dependent on their skills and their gear, their lifeline to civilization far behind them, a remote outpost. They were at the mercy of the elements, and something far more sinister than a blizzard was about to descend upon them, an unseen force that would shatter their fragile peace and defy all logical explanation.
As you imagine the soft sounds of them settling into their sleeping bags, the quiet breaths, the distant howl of the wind, let a sense of deep, foreboding calm settle over you. This was the moment before the inexplicable, the fragile peace before the unimaginable chaos. Feel the quiet anticipation, the creeping unease, as the curtain falls on their last ordinary night, unaware of the terror that awaited them just beyond the canvas, or perhaps already within it. The mountain watched, silent and unblinking, as the stage was set for a horror that would defy all understanding, a chilling tableau of impending doom, observed by an indifferent ancient landscape. Chapter 3. The Unveiling of the Bizarre Scene. You are now transported to a chilling scene, weeks after the last faint signals of the hikers faded into the vast snowy silence. Imagine the biting cold that still permeates the air, even in late February, a cold that seeps into your bones and lingers long after you've left the mountains, a constant, sharp presence. The initial concern had escalated into alarm when the group failed to return by their scheduled date, prompting a full-scale missing persons alert, then to full-blown search and rescue efforts. Volunteers, led by university staff and military personnel, fanned out across the formidable terrain, battling fierce blizzards and the relentless grip of winter, their determination fueled by desperation. The search parties, themselves risking hypothermia and frostbite in the brutal conditions, covered vast distances, their hope dwindling with each passing day, the vastness of the wilderness seemingly swallowing any trace, their efforts seeming almost futile. The very air you breathe feels heavy with unspoken dread, a tangible weight of fear and uncertainty, as days stretched into weeks with no sign of the 9 young adventurers. The crunch of their boots on the packed snow, the muffled calls carried on the wind, the constant scanning of the white expanse for any sign, these were the sounds and sights of a desperate, increasingly futile search, their faces grim, their movements wary, but their resolve unbroken. Then, on February 26th, one of the search parties, led by Mikhail Sharavin, a student volunteer whose heart must have pounded with a mix of dread and anticipation, made a discovery that would forever etch itself into the annals of unsolved mysteries. You can almost hear the muted shouts across the snow, the sudden, sharp intake of breath as they realize what lies before them, a moment of profound, unsettling recognition that something was terribly wrong. There, partially buried under a thick blanket of snow, was the tent. Not collapsed, not swept away by an avalanche, but standing, albeit partially covered and wind-battered, on the eastern slope of Kholat Syakhl. A beacon, yet a paradox, a symbol of shelter inexplicably violated. The initial relief of finding it would have been immediately overshadowed by a profound creeping sense of wrongness, a chilling premonition that something truly terrible had occurred, something that defied the simple logic of nature. The canvas, once taut and protective, now sagged, its color muted by snow and shadow, giving it the appearance of a ghostly, abandoned shell, a silent scream frozen in time, bearing witness to an untold horror. But this was no ordinary abandoned campsite. As they approached, a profound sense of unease would have settled over the searchers, a cold dread far deeper than the ambient temperature, a feeling that defied rational explanation, an instinctual alarm. The tent was badly damaged, not from the outside, as one might expect from a storm or animal attack, but from within. Imagine seeing jagged, haphazard tears, as if someone had frantically slashed their way out, carving through the heavy canvas with a knife from the inside, a desperate escape under impossible circumstances. The edges of the tears would have been stiff with ice, the raw canvas fibers exposed, a testament to violent, desperate urgency, a silent witness to a moment of sheer terror frozen in time. This immediately shattered any conventional explanation of a gradual abandonment or a tent collapse. It suggested a sudden, desperate escape, a desperate need to get out, whatever the cost, even if it meant abandoning all logic and exposing themselves to the deadly elements. The very act of cutting through their only shelter, exposing themselves to the deadly elements, was an act of pure, unthinking terror, a raw, primal response to an unseen threat that was more immediate than freezing to death. It defied all logic of survival, presenting an immediate, confounding riddle to the seasoned rescuers and investigators, the first undeniable sign that this was no ordinary mountain accident. The image of those frantic slashes, crude and desperate, burned into the minds of the initial responders, leaving an indelible mark of profound horror and confusion. As you consider this image, allow yourself to feel the disquieting implications. Why would experienced hikers, in the midst of a blizzard, in temperatures that could kill within minutes, cut their way out of their only shelter? Why not use the zippered entrance, which was still intact and functional, and would have offered a far less dangerous and logical exit? This single detail immediately introduced a layer of baffling irrationality to the unfolding mystery. It defied common sense, challenged their understanding of survival protocols, and hinted at a panic so profound it overrode all training and logic, suggesting a threat that was more immediate and terrifying than the certainty of freezing to death, a threat that manifested within their sanctuary. The image of those frantic slashes, crude and desperate, burned into the minds of the initial responders, leaving an indelible mark of profound horror and confusion, solidifying the idea that something truly extraordinary had occurred.
Further examination of the tent revealed more disturbing facts. Inside, scattered amongst the snow that had drifted in through the rents, were most of the hikers' belongings. Their boots, warm clothing, heavy outer layers, food supplies, even their cameras and diaries were left behind, seemingly abandoned in an instant, in the midst of a meal, frozen in time, untouched for weeks. This wasn't a planned departure, not a considered retreat, not an orderly evacuation. This was an emergency, an immediate, unthinking flight from an overwhelming terror, an instantaneous decision to flee. Imagine the personal items, frozen solid, untouched by human hands for weeks, holding silent testimony to a sudden, terrifying event. A pair of gloves, stiff with ice, lying next to a half-eaten meal, frozen in time on a small piece of cloth. A camera, its lens still pointed towards the tent opening, capturing perhaps a final, unwitting glimpse of the horror, a silent witness that would never reveal its secrets. The very air around the tent seemed to hum with the lingering echo of unimaginable terror, a palpable sense of something profoundly wrong, a chilling stillness that permeated the entire area, an aura of dread. The absence of a struggle for survival inside the tent was as perplexing as the chaotic flight from it. They simply fled, abandoning everything critical for their survival in the brutal conditions. The tracks in the snow leading away from the tent told another crucial, baffling part of the story. Investigators meticulously documented them, though many were swiftly covered by fresh snowfall and wind, making their preservation a stroke of grim luck and a race against time. What they found were bare footprints, or footprints from socks or single boots, leading downhill, away from the tent, towards the forest line nearly a mile away. You can almost hear the crunch of the snow underfoot. Imagine the excruciating pain of exposed skin in temperatures plummeting to -25 to -30 degrees Celsius, with biting winds that made it feel even colder, far below freezing, a rapid descent into hypothermia. The wind chill alone would have been a deadly force, capable of inducing frostbite within minutes, leading to numbness, then blackening of the tissue, a rapid onset of pain, then numbness, and ultimately gangrene and cell death. The thought of running, stumbling, or even just walking in such conditions, so poorly dressed, with skin exposed to the raw elements, is a chilling testament to the severity of whatever drove them. The raw, searing cold would have burned their exposed skin, each step a further agony, a desperate gamble for survival against an unseen enemy that was worse than the elements themselves. The sheer distance covered by some of the barefoot prints only added to the terrifying picture of their flight, a marathon of terror. Why would anyone flee into such an unforgiving night, so lightly dressed, abandoning their only protection against the elements? It suggested an overwhelming, immediate threat, something so terrifying that the pain of freezing to death seemed preferable to remaining inside the tent, a survival instinct overridden by a more primal fear, a collective panic that defied all logic. What could compel seasoned survivalists, trained in extreme conditions, to make such a suicidal decision, abandoning all their training, all their carefully planned preparations, all their critical gear that represented their very survival? Was it an external threat or something internal, a sudden collective madness that gripped them simultaneously? A shared hallucination, perhaps, or a psychological breakdown under extreme pressure? The very ground, covered in sharp, frozen crusts of snow and hidden rocks, would have ripped at their bare feet, causing cuts and abrasions, leaving behind a trail of blood. Yet they continued to move away from their only source of safety, their desperation overriding their pain and rational thought. The sheer distance covered by some of the barefoot prints only added to the terrifying picture of their flight, a chilling testament to the urgency of their escape. The absence of any signs of struggle or forced entry around the tent only deepened the mystery. There were no tracks from other people, no signs of an animal attack, no evidence of a struggle in the snow outside the tent that would indicate an assailant. It was as if whatever had driven them out had come and gone without leaving any other discernible trace, or had been an invisible event, an invisible horror. The snow around the tent was pristine, save for their own footprints leading away, leaving a clean, disturbing paradox that defied explanation. This lack of external signs of an assailant made the whole scenario even more unsettling, hinting at an unseen, perhaps psychological, terror, or a force so swift and powerful it left no trace but its effect on the victims, a ghost of an event. The quiet, almost surgical precision of the tent's abandonment, despite the internal chaos it implied, was deeply unsettling, suggesting a horror that left no outward mess.
The search continued down the slope, following the faint, fading trail of footprints, as the blizzard's fresh snow threatened to erase them forever, making their preservation a race against nature. The terrain was treacherous, steep in places, covered in deep snowdrifts and sharp rocks hidden beneath the white blanket, making every step precarious for the searchers, a difficult and dangerous undertaking. As you envision this descent, feel the chill seeping into your bones. Imagine the growing sense of desperation that would have accompanied the searchers as they followed this grim path, each finding a deeper pit of dread with every step. Each step a silent prayer, each glance a desperate hope to find someone alive, yet knowing deep down the chances were vanishingly small, given the conditions and the time that had passed. The exhaustion of the searchers, their numb fingers and aching feet, mirrored the desperate struggle of those they sought, a shared experience of the mountain's harshness, a testament to the immense physical and emotional toll. The cold wind howled, mocking their efforts, carrying away the echoes of their hopes, solidifying the profound sense of loss and despair that permeated the desolate landscape. The discovery of the tent was not a solution, but the first terrifying piece of a puzzle that would only grow more complex with each subsequent find. It eliminated simple explanations like getting lost or a gradual decision to leave camp, pushing the narrative into truly unknown territory, beyond the realm of conventional mountaineering accidents. Instead, it painted a picture of instantaneous collective panic, an eruption of terror that defied all normal human behavior and rational survival instincts. The untouched belongings, the slashed tent, the barefoot tracks leading into the deadly night, these were the first stark truths revealed by the unforgiving mountain, truths that defied logic and pointed towards a truly extraordinary event, something beyond the realm of ordinary human experience and scientific understanding. The initial theories of a simple accident began to crumble under the weight of this bizarre evidence, replaced by a growing sense of dread and incomprehension, an almost existential fear of the unknown that permeated the very air. Just settle into the quiet and let the unsettling images of that desolate camp drift through your mind, a testament to an unseen horror that gripped 9 souls in the silent, icy heart of the Urals, leaving an indelible mark on history. Chapter 4. The Macabre Discoveries and Bizarre Injuries.
You continue your grim journey, following the path of the search teams as they piece together the fragments of that fateful night. The discovery of the tent was merely the beginning of the horror, a prologue to a more grotesque unveiling, a hint of the true terror that awaited them. What followed, as the melting snow slowly unveiled its secrets, plunged the mystery deeper into the realms of the inexplicable, past the point of simple tragedy into something truly baffling and profoundly disturbing. Imagine the agonizing wait, the slow thaw of winter, as hope dwindled and grim determination took its place. The sun slowly softening the hardened layers of snow, revealing what lay beneath, pixel by pixel, a slow-motion reveal of terror that unfolded over weeks. The air, still bitterly cold, now carried a faint, unsettling scent, a premonition of what was to come, a metallic tang, perhaps, or a hint of decay, mingling with the clean mountain air, a smell of dread. On February 27th, a day after the tent was found, the first two bodies were located.
You can almost feel the collective sorrow that would have washed over the search party, a mix of relief that the missing had been found and crushing despair at their fate, a double-edged emotion that brought little comfort. They were Yuri Doroshenko and Georgy Krivonischenko, found beneath a large cedar tree, nearly 1.5 miles downhill from the tent, far from the only protection they had, exposed to the elements. They were dressed only in their underwear and socks, or very thin clothing, their bodies showing classic signs of severe hypothermia, twisted into unnatural positions, their skin discolored by the extreme cold. Their hands were abraded, raw and scraped, suggesting they had climbed the tree, perhaps to try and find their way in the blizzard, to gain a vantage point in the whiteout, or for some desperate, unknown reason, a final frantic attempt at high ground, a futile search for a landmark in the blinding snow, or perhaps even an attempt to flee from something pursuing them. The very bark of the tree, rough and cold, would have scraped against their freezing skin, leaving raw, open wounds, a testament to their struggle, their last physical effort. But even at this early stage, there were unsettling anomalies. A small campfire had been built under the cedar tree, its embers now long cold and covered by snow, a pathetic attempt of warmth against the overwhelming cold. Why build a fire if you were fleeing a threat, and why then expose yourselves to the elements without sufficient clothing, abandoning the very gear that could have saved them? It was as if they had tried to establish a temporary, desperate camp, a last gasp for warmth and survival, a flicker of hope, yet died before they could benefit from its meager warmth, succumbing to the cold despite their efforts. The scattered remains of small branches, burned to ash, still clung to the ground, a silent testament to a brief, desperate attempt at survival, a final, flickering hope extinguished by the elements. The smell of burning wood, long gone, now replaced by the icy tang of snow, still seemed to linger in the air as a ghostly memory, a poignant reminder of their last futile act of defiance against the cold. The presence of the fire suggested a pause, a moment of trying to regain control, yet their state of dress contradicted any rational planning, adding to the growing sense of paradox. Over the next few days, 3 more bodies were discovered between the cedar tree and the tent: Igor Dyatlov, Zinaida Kolmogorova, and Rustem Slobodin. They were found progressively further uphill, suggesting they had attempted to return to the tent, perhaps to retrieve warm clothing or to seek shelter from the unseen threat that had driven them out, a desperate last-ditch effort to reach safety, to reclaim their sanctuary. Dyatlov was found clutching a tree branch, his face turned towards the tent, as if still leading, still trying to get back, a final determined gesture in his last moments, frozen in a tableau of leadership even in death. Kolmogorova had a small internal bruise on her hip, consistent with a fall or a blunt impact, perhaps from stumbling in the dark or being struck by something unseen, an initial injury that contributed to her demise. Slobodin had a crack in his skull, though forensic experts later concluded this injury was likely not fatal and could have been caused by a fall on ice or hitting his head on a rock during a tumble down the slope in the darkness, adding to the confusion of injuries, a minor trauma in the face of the ultimate cause of death.
The bodies themselves would have appeared stiff and unnatural in their frozen state, their faces often contorted in a grimace of pain or terror, their skin discolored by the extreme cold into a purplish, waxy hue, resembling marble in its coldness, a haunting sight for the recovery teams. The silence that surrounded these finds was chilling, broken only by the quiet, heavy breaths of the searchers and the muffled sounds of the digging, a solemn and grim procession of discovery. These initial 5 bodies showed signs primarily consistent with hypothermia, frostbite, internal organ damage from the cold, and the paradoxical undressing common in severe hypothermia, where victims, feeling a sudden flush of heat as their core temperature plummets, begin to shed their clothes, hastening their own demise, a cruel trick of the dying brain. The skin might have appeared discolored, a ghastly purplish hue from the extreme cold, stiff and unyielding to the touch, resembling frozen stone. The quiet, tragic stillness of their forms would have spoken volumes about their desperate struggle against the elements, a losing battle against an insidious enemy that slowly robbed them of their warmth and consciousness, leaving them as silent testaments to winter's unforgiving power. Yet, even with these findings, the core questions remained unanswered. What drove them out of the tent in the first place, so suddenly and violently? Why were they so underdressed when they left, abandoning vital gear? And why were they scattered across such a wide area, some seemingly trying to return, others clinging to the last vestiges of a fire, while some simply lay where they fell, a chaotic spread that suggested profound disorientation? The initial sense of grief was quickly overshadowed by an unsettling wave of bewilderment, as the scene presented more questions than answers, a riddle wrapped in an enigma. The perplexing nature of the event, however, emerged in early May, as the deep snow finally melted, revealing a ravine approximately 75 meters from the cedar tree, hidden from view by deep snowdrifts and deceptive terrain, concealed until the spring thaw, a secret held by the melting ice. Here, buried under 13 feet of snow and ice, the remaining 4 bodies were found, preserved by the cold, yet revealing injuries that defied easy explanation. This discovery brought with it a cascade of baffling revelations that challenged any simple, natural explanation. These 4 hikers, Lyudmila Dubinina, Alexander Kolevatov, Nicolas Thibeaux-Brignolles, and Semyon Zolotaryov, presented severe and puzzling injuries that challenged medical understanding. Lyudmila Dubinina was found in a stream of meltwater, exhibiting injuries that were noted as highly unusual and contributed to the mystery. The raw, exposed tissue, preserved by the icy water, would have been a ghastly sight, almost unreal in its gruesomeness, as if something had meticulously removed these soft tissues, leaving a profound sense of violation.
Alexander Kolevatov also had missing eyes, and a portion of his skull bone was missing, suggesting an immense impact that tore through bone and tissue, a devastating blow. Nicolas Thibeaux-Brignolles suffered a massive skull fracture, a blow so forceful it would have been instantly fatal, his head severely damaged from a blunt force impact that crushed bone, yet his scalp remained relatively intact, a paradox of trauma. And Semyon Zolotaryov, the oldest member, had extensive chest trauma, fractured ribs as if he had been crushed by an immense force like a heavy vehicle, yet with no external signs of the injury, no bruising, no abrasions, no cuts on his skin whatsoever. His torso was inwardly caved, but his skin remained smooth and unbroken, an almost alien type of injury. Lyudmila also had fractured ribs, similar to Zolotaryov, again with no external marks of violence, her chest cavity essentially crushed, yet her skin remained intact, a macabre medical anomaly that left forensics baffled. Imagine the profound shock and disbelief that would have rippled through the investigators, even the most hardened forensic experts, as they examined these bodies. This was not hypothermia. This was not a simple fall. These were injuries consistent with a high-speed car crash or a direct violent impact from something massive like a heavy object swinging with incredible force or being caught in a powerful blast wave. Yet they were in the middle of nowhere, miles from any roads, any vehicles, any large machinery, any known source of such immense non-deforming power. The lack of external trauma on the chest and abdomen injuries was particularly baffling, a medical paradox that defied all conventional understanding of blunt force.
How could someone sustain such crushing force, powerful enough to break multiple ribs, without a single bruise or abrasion on their skin, without tearing fabric? The only possible explanation, medically, was blunt force trauma from an extremely powerful, non-deforming impact, a pressure wave, perhaps, or a colossal soft impact that left no external mark, an enigma for forensic science that screamed of an unknown force. The sheer physical impossibility of these injuries, given the remote mountain environment, left even seasoned forensic pathologists scratching their heads, their instruments powerless to explain the inexplicable, their knowledge base insufficient to categorize such trauma. Adding to the strangeness, some of their clothing, recovered from these later victims, was found to be highly radioactive, though the levels were not immediately dangerous, being several times higher than normal background radiation, but not acutely lethal. This detail, perhaps more than any other, sparked the most wild and enduring theories, pushing the incident beyond natural explanation. The faint, almost imperceptible hum of a Geiger counter, a sound that in that era would immediately evoke fears of atomic testing and Cold War anxieties, a chilling echo of nuclear power in the heart of the wilderness, amplified the sense of unseen, terrifying forces at play. The very fabric they wore seemed to hum with an unseen energy, a silent testimony to a terrifying, unknown force that had touched them, adding an almost otherworldly dimension to the tragedy. The clothing itself was also a puzzle. The later victims, though still inadequately dressed for the conditions, were wearing clothes that had seemingly been taken from the initial 5 who had succumbed to hypothermia. For instance, Dubinina was wearing Krivonischenko's trousers, and Zolotaryov was wearing Dubinina's faux fur coat.
This suggested that in their final, desperate moments, amidst chaos and unimaginable cold, they had tried to strip the dead for their clothing, a chilling testament to their fight for survival, even as their bodies were ravaged by unseen forces. The rough texture of frozen fabric, the desperate fumbling in the dark, the horrifying realization that their friends were gone and they needed their last vestiges of warmth, a macabre exchange of garments in the freezing night, a final, desperate act of utilitarian survival underscored the intensity of their struggle and the depth of their desperation in the face of overwhelming odds. The forensic reports, meticulously detailing these grotesque findings, painted a picture of terror and overwhelming force, yet provided no answers as to the source. The smell of decay, though muted by the cold and snow, would have been present as the bodies were recovered, a stark contrast to the clean, crisp mountain air, making the scene even more difficult to bear and more viscerally disturbing. The chilling sight of a vacant stare or a broken form frozen in the last throes of a terrifying ordeal left an indelible mark on all who witnessed it, etching itself into their memories forever, a scene of unspeakable horror that defied any logical narrative. The quiet solemnity of the recovery operation was punctuated by the collective gasp of disbelief as each new detail of the horror emerged, deepening the mystery with every discovery, creating a sense of profound unease that would never truly dissipate. The question echoed through the silent mountains and the bewildered investigators. What could inflict such injuries, drive such panic, and leave so little trace? The mountain had finally given up its dead, but in doing so it had unveiled a riddle of profound and disturbing proportions, a mystery that would continue to haunt the living, a chilling tale of the inexplicable. Allow yourself to feel the profound unease of these discoveries, the chilling reality of what was found, and the unsettling questions they left in their wake, questions that even now, decades later, still reverberate through the quiet contemplation of this enduring enigma, a testament to its bizarre and horrifying nature, forever etched into the landscape of human mystery. Chapter 5: The Official Verdict and Its Cracks. You are now in the aftermath of the grim discoveries, witnessing the official response and the attempt to impose order on a chaotic, inexplicable reality. Imagine the bureaucratic machinery grinding into action in a remote corner of the Soviet Union, a vast, powerful system accustomed to control and clear explanations, now faced with something utterly beyond its immediate grasp, something that threatened to expose its limitations and challenge its narratives of an orderly world. The investigators, many of them experienced in mountain rescue and forensic analysis, were confronted with a case that defied all their training and expectations, a puzzle that simply refused to fit into any known category of human or natural disaster, stubbornly resisting classification. The initial reports, detailing the slashed tent and the bizarre injuries, must have sent a ripple of alarm far beyond the local authorities, reaching the highest echelons of government, where such anomalies were often viewed with suspicion and a desire for swift containment, particularly in a politically sensitive era. The Cold War context meant any unusual incident, especially one involving a group of young, bright students from a prestigious university, carried immense political sensitivities, potentially attracting unwanted international attention or fostering internal unrest and questioning of state competence, a vulnerability the regime could ill afford. There was an urgent, unspoken need to control the narrative, to provide a plausible, non-alarming explanation, even if it meant stretching the bounds of credibility.
to maintain an image of an infallible system and quell public anxiety. The faint smell of stale cigarette smoke, perhaps, clinging to the official papers, a testament to the anxious hours spent trying to reconcile the irreconcilable. The rhythmic clatter of typewriters filling the air as reports were hastily compiled and revised, all leading to a predetermined conclusion that offered convenience over clarity. The investigation was led by Lev Ivanov, a prosecutor from Sverdlovsk, now Yekaterinburg. He was a man accustomed to logic and evidence, to solving cases with clear motives and discernible culprits, bound by the rigid strictures of the Soviet legal system, where answers were expected, not questions. Yet even he found himself grappling with phenomena that seemed to defy the known laws of physics and human behavior, a case that slipped through the cracks of rational explanation, a true anomaly. You can almost feel the weight of his responsibility, the mounting pressure from above to find a rational explanation, to provide closure to the grieving families and to the wider public who were now hearing whispers of the terrifying events in the Urals, rumors that could quickly escalate into unsettling conspiracy theories or be exploited by foreign adversaries as propaganda. The sound of official documents being shuffled, the hushed tones of serious conversations behind closed doors, the heavy silence in interrogation rooms where theories were debated and discarded, one after another, as the evidence stubbornly refused to align with conventional explanations. Ivanov himself later expressed his personal frustration and belief that a supernatural element or an unknown force was at play, an admission that would have been unthinkable in his official capacity, hinting at the depth of his personal bewilderment. The official conclusion, delivered in May 1959 after a brief and, some argue, superficial inquiry that seemed designed to quickly close the case rather than truly solve it, was a compelling natural force. This phrase, vague and ultimately unsatisfying, became the official answer, the state's final, immutable word. It carefully avoided assigning blame, acknowledged the inexplicable nature of the deaths without truly explaining them, and offered no true insight into what that compelling natural force might have been, leaving it open to interpretation but devoid of concrete detail, a deliberate ambiguity. Imagine the forced calmness in the voices of officials as they presented this conclusion, their faces betraying little emotion, knowing that it left far more questions than it answered, leaving a lingering taste of unease in the air, a sense of something being deliberately withheld or obscured. The faint smell of stale cigarette smoke, perhaps, clinging to the official papers, a testament to the anxious hours spent trying to reconcile the irreconcilable, creating an atmosphere of lingering tension. But what did compelling natural force actually mean in practical terms? For Ivanov, at least initially, it was the only category available to classify something so utterly beyond his grasp, a convenient catch-all phrase for the unexplainable that allowed the case to be formally closed and the files sealed. He considered an avalanche, for instance, which seemed the most plausible natural explanation for the tent being cut from the inside and for the crushing injuries. An avalanche could have buried the tent, forcing the hikers to cut their way out in panic to escape suffocation or crushing weight, a desperate, logical response to an immediate, life-threatening threat. The immense force of a rapidly moving mass of snow and ice, he reasoned, could also explain the fractured ribs and skull, the kind of blunt force trauma that could occur without external marks if the body was compressed by a massive, non-rigid object like snow, a sudden, powerful squeeze. You can almost hear the rumble of a distant, unseen snowslide, the terrifying rush of displaced air preceding the snow, the sudden, overwhelming blanket of white that descends silently, trapping everything in its path. A truly terrifying and plausible natural disaster that happens swiftly and without warning. The idea of being buried alive, of the struggle against tons of crushing snow, is itself a terrifying thought, lending initial weight to the theory as a primary candidate. However, several critical pieces of evidence severely undermined the avalanche theory, making it increasingly difficult to sustain, even for those who wished to believe it for simplicity's sake. Firstly, the tent was not buried by a massive amount of snow, nor was it deformed in a way consistent with a powerful avalanche. While partially covered, its overall structure remained somewhat intact, and the tent poles were not uniformly snapped or bent in a manner typical of a large snowmass impact that would completely flatten it. Secondly, the slope where the tent was pitched was not particularly steep, about 15–20 degrees, which is generally not conducive to large, spontaneous avalanches, especially without recent heavy snowfall immediately prior to the incident that would have destabilized the snowpack. The conditions were extremely cold and dry, making classic powdery avalanches less likely.
Thirdly, an experienced mountaineer would recognize the signs of an unstable snowpack, such as visible stress cracks, humthing sounds, or recent heavy snowfall creating layers of instability. These hikers were skilled. They would likely not have camped in such a risky spot without taking precautions, or would have detected the danger beforehand, especially Dyatlov himself, an experienced leader known for his caution. Finally, the footprints leading away from the tent were not consistent with people stumbling out of an avalanche. They showed a measured, though desperate, retreat in a relatively organized single file for a significant distance down the slope, almost as if they were walking away from something, not scrambling to escape from under something that had just struck them. The crunch of boots on firm snow, rather than the chaotic scramble through a shifting snowmass, painted a picture of flight, not of being caught unawares and buried. The sheer depth of the snow at the site, combined with the firm, almost icy surface, also worked against the idea of a loose, sliding snowmass, further weakening the avalanche hypothesis. Other natural phenomena were also considered and quickly dismissed for their inability to explain the full scope of the tragedy, particularly the specific and bizarre injuries that truly defied conventional explanation. A severe katabatic wind, a powerful downhill windstorm, could explain the extreme cold and disorienting conditions, the feeling of being buffeted and overwhelmed by the elements, but not the specific traumatic injuries like broken ribs or a shattered skull without any external marks of impact from flying debris. The roar of such a wind, a deafening, constant sound that would strip away body heat and make communication impossible, would have been terrifying, perhaps inducing panic, but wouldn't break bones internally without external marks of impact.
The possibility of an infrasound phenomenon, ultra-low frequency sound waves that can induce panic, nausea, and disorientation in humans, a theory that gained some traction later in more speculative analyses, was intriguing. This silent, insidious hum that could drive one to madness, yet leave no physical trace, could certainly explain the immediate flight and the disorientated state. However, it cannot account for the severe physical trauma found on 4 of the bodies, such as crushed ribs and skull fractures, directly inflicted upon the victims, unless it led to a subsequent violent reaction or fall against a hard object,
which still doesn't fully explain the precise nature of the internal injuries without external bruising, remaining a partial explanation at best. The lack of external human presence was also a key factor in the official conclusion. No other tracks besides the hiker's own, no signs of struggle outside the tent, no evidence of other people arriving or departing the immediate area. This definitively ruled out a direct attack by local Mansi tribesmen, a theory that was briefly considered due to the remote location and the common trope of indigenous hostility in such narratives. However, it was quickly and definitively dismissed due to lack of evidence and the generally peaceful nature of the Mansi people, who were known to be respectful of the land and its visitors, and who had often aided lost travelers in the past. The Mansi had no history of violence against outsiders, and their culture held a deep reverence for the mountains and their sacred sites, making such an act highly uncharacteristic. The smell of their traditional fires, the sound of their quiet chants would have been a comforting presence in other contexts, but here they were simply not present, leaving the group utterly alone with whatever happened, reinforcing the eerie solitude of the incident. The investigation was officially closed a few months after the discovery of the bodies, the files sealed and classified, only to be partially released decades later, adding another layer of suspicion and fueling decades of speculation. This swift closure, coupled with the ambiguous verdict, immediately fueled speculation and suspicion among the public and the victims' families, who felt denied the full truth. Why the secrecy? Why the rush to close the case, especially with such baffling evidence and unanswered questions? Why the lack of a more definitive explanation, given the bizarre nature of the injuries and the public's demand for answers? The Soviet authorities, known for their opacity and their desire to maintain an image of control and order, and to suppress anything that might create panic or suggest weakness in the system, inadvertently created a fertile ground for rumors and conspiracy theories to take root and flourish, giving the case legendary status and ensuring its persistence in the collective consciousness. The feeling of being shut out, of answers being withheld, would have been palpable, like a door slamming shut in your face, leaving you in frustrated darkness, fueling a deep distrust of official narratives. The families were left to grieve without true understanding, haunted by the vague phrase, compelling natural force, a phrase that seemed to dismiss their profound loss without adequate explanation, a profound and lasting injustice that kept the wounds raw. This official silence, this compelling natural force that remained undefined and unexplained, became a powerful contributing factor to the enduring enigma of Dyatlov Pass. It allowed the cracks in the narrative to widen, to be filled by the imaginations of those who sought clearer, more dramatic answers, creating a vacuum that theories, however outlandish, rushed to fill, reflecting human nature's abhorrence of a vacuum. The families, devastated and confused, were left with an unsatisfying explanation for the brutal deaths of their loved ones. You can almost hear the quiet sobs, the frustrated arguments, the unanswered questions echoing in empty rooms, in hushed conversations, in letters written and never truly answered. The weight of official dismissal pressing heavily on their hearts, denying them the truth they so desperately sought. A profound and lasting injustice that ensured the mystery would linger for generations. The story, however, was far from over. The seeds of doubt had been sown, and the human need for understanding, for a logical resolution to such profound trauma, would not be appeased by such a vague pronouncement.
especially when the evidence seemed to scream otherwise. The official verdict, while closing the case on paper, only served to open it wider in the public consciousness, creating a legend of the inexplicable that would persist for generations, passed down through whispers and fearful tales, ensuring that the mystery of Dyatlov Pass would never truly die, but rather grow into an enduring legend of the Urals. Just let the silence of those sealed files settle around you, the quiet, persistent hum of questions that refuse to be silenced, waiting for someone to seek answers again, to peel back the layers of official obfuscation and search for the hidden truth, a quest that continues to this very day, drawing new generations into its puzzling embrace. Chapter 6. The Whispers of Unseen Forces and Cover-Ups. You find yourself now in a landscape shaped not just by snow and rock, but by the swirling currents of speculation and fear, where the human imagination grapples with the inexplicable, seeking order in chaos. With the official compelling natural force verdict offering little true closure, the void was quickly filled by a multitude of alternative theories, some grounded in a desperate search for logic, others venturing into the realm of the truly bizarre, a testament to the human mind's relentless pursuit of answers, even when none are readily available or palatable. This is where the deconstruction engine truly comes into play, as we explore the tantalizing allure of these ideas, presenting them in their full imaginative breadth, only to then examine their foundation with a critical yet empathetic eye, separating the plausible from the purely speculative, the verifiable from the fantastical. The air here, though physically cold, is thick with the metaphorical dust of decades of debate, the quiet murmur of countless voices, each proposing their own answer to the ultimate riddle, a chorus of theories rising from the depths of human curiosity and unease. One of the most persistent and unsettling theories involves secret military tests. Imagine the hushed conversations, the fearful glances, the inherent distrust of authority prevalent in the Soviet era, where state secrets were guarded with extreme vigilance, and military activities in remote regions were commonplace and utterly opaque to the public, a breeding ground for suspicion. The proximity of the Dyatlov Pass to known military testing sites, coupled with the unusual injuries and the reported radioactivity on some clothing, fueled this narrative, making it feel chillingly plausible in the Cold War climate, where every unexplained event could be a state secret.
The idea was that the hikers, through an unfortunate twist of fate, stumbled upon a secret testing ground for some unknown weapon, perhaps a new type of explosive that produced a powerful blast wave without a large visible explosion or a telltale crater, or a low-frequency sonic weapon designed to disorient and incapacitate, inducing extreme panic and nausea, or even a form of experimental radiation that could cause internal damage to organs and tissues without breaking the skin, a truly horrifying and invisible threat. The injuries, particularly the internal blunt trauma without external marks, could, in this chilling scenario, be attributed to a powerful blast wave or an unidentifiable energy discharge that ripped through their bodies without breaking the skin, a concussive force that literally tore organs and bones within the body.
The orange discoloration of some of the skin, initially reported by family members, though not always present in official reports, was also cited as potential evidence of radiation exposure, adding another layer of grim scientific possibility. A physical mark of an unseen enemy, a silent, lingering trace of a catastrophic event. Consider the profound implications of such a scenario. The blast, silent or otherwise, could have caused a sudden, overwhelming panic, a primal fear that overrode all rational thought and survival training, forcing the hikers to cut their way out of the tent in terror, desperate to escape an immediate, unseen threat that had suddenly erupted around them, a fear so potent it made freezing to death seem a preferable alternative. The internal injuries, the crushed ribs, the shattered skull, could then be the direct result of the immense pressure wave on the human body, or perhaps from being violently thrown against the ground or rocks without their heavy clothing offering sufficient cushioning, or from falling into the ravine in disorientation caused by the blast.
The desperate flight into the sub-zero night, underdressed and unprepared, would then be an attempt to escape immediate, invisible danger, preferring the cold death to the horror that had just unfolded inside the tent or around them. If this were the case, the military would have a compelling and urgent reason for a rapid and comprehensive cover-up, for sealing the files and offering a vague, unprovable explanation to prevent public panic, avoid international scrutiny, or conceal the nature of their secret weapons development, a standard practice of the era. The sound of distant, muffled explosions, the faint aftertaste of metallic dust on the tongue, the pervasive sense of being watched from afar, these chilling thoughts would permeate the minds of those who considered this theory, giving it a tangible, terrifying realism that resonated deeply with the Soviet reality of secrecy and hidden operations. The profound silence of the vast mountains, usually a comfort, here becomes ominous, as if holding its breath on a terrible secret, complicit in the cover-up, its natural beauty masking a hidden horror. However, the military theory, while compelling in its narrative power and its ability to explain some of the more bizarre elements of the incident, faces its own set of significant challenges and ultimately lacks definitive, irrefutable evidence. No definitive evidence of a military presence or recent testing was ever found at the site. No spent ordnance, no large-scale debris, no telltale signs of a blast crater that would accompany such a powerful weapon, even an experimental one that sought to minimize external traces. While the radioactivity was noted, its levels were relatively low and could potentially be explained by other mundane means, such as contamination from radium dial watches, old compasses, or luminous paints common in that era that contained radioactive elements, often thorium or uranium, though this explanation has been debated and doesn't account for all anomalies or the concentration found, especially on specific clothing items. The powerful, unseen force inflicting the injuries remains without a clear, verifiable source tied directly to military activity, leaving a gap in the causality. Furthermore, for a military test to happen undetected, and then for the bodies to be left behind rather than swiftly removed and processed, seems an improbable scenario for a regime as meticulously controlling and efficient in its secrecy as the Soviet Union. A full professional cleanup and removal of all evidence, including the bodies, would be expected to leave no trace. The silence of the vast mountains, usually a comfort, here becomes ominous, as if holding its breath on a terrible secret.
yet it offers no concrete proof of a military hand in the tragedy. Another popular theory, and one that has recently gained official attention and a degree of scientific backing, is the slab avalanche or wind slab theory. This suggests that a specific type of avalanche, where a rigid slab of compacted snow breaks off and slides downhill, was the culprit. Unlike a typical powdery avalanche, a slab avalanche can be triggered by seemingly minor disturbances, such as the hikers pitching their tent and digging into the snow, or even subtle shifts in temperature and wind patterns, making it less predictable and more insidious. The theory posits that the tent was pitched on a snow slab that suddenly fractured and slid, sending a mass of compacted snow down upon them.
This could explain the tent being partially crushed and the internal injuries from the impact of the snow slab, which could hit with immense force yet dissipate quickly, leaving few traces of a traditional avalanche aftermath as the snow settles or is swept away by wind. Imagine the sudden, muffled roar as the snow mass dislodges, a terrifying, deep sound preceding the impact, the pressure building, the feeling of being trapped and crushed by tons of silent white weight, a deafening silence followed by the terrifying realization of being buried alive or severely injured, a moment of crushing terror. This theory offers a more scientific and plausible explanation for the specific type of trauma observed on the victims, particularly the crushing chest injuries without external marks. The hikers, roused from their sleep by the shifting snow or the roar of the slab, might have panicked and cut their way out, fearing total burial or suffocating under the weight of the snow. A desperate survival instinct that overrides the use of the zippered entrance. Their desperate flight into the extreme cold, underdressed and disoriented, would then be an immediate fight for immediate survival against the elements, leading inevitably to hypothermia and further disorientation as their bodies succumbed to the cold. The search for the missing body parts, such as Lyudmila's tongue, is often attributed to post-mortem scavenging by animals like foxes or wolves, which are known to target soft tissues, especially after the bodies had been exposed to meltwater for weeks in a ravine, making them accessible and soft targets for scavengers. This explanation is generally accepted by forensic experts as a natural occurrence, though it is not fully satisfactory for many researchers who note the precise nature of the removals, suggesting something more than random scavenging. The lack of typical avalanche signs, such as a massive snow pile at the bottom or obvious fracture lines higher up the slope, is often explained by the nature of a relatively small, specific slab avalanche, which could have been quickly covered by later snowfall and wind-driven snow, dissipating its traces and making it look like untouched terrain. The very cold conditions also meant the snow was not particularly wet or prone to typical avalanches, though wind slabs behave differently, forming hard, brittle layers that can suddenly fracture. The feeling of cold, dry snow, crystalline and sharp, would be different from the wet, heavy snow of a typical avalanche, perhaps explaining the lack of external bruising or tearing on the skin when subjected to immense pressure, acting as a soft, blunt force. Yet even the slab avalanche theory, despite its scientific backing and recent official endorsement, has its persistent critics and lingering questions that prevent universal acceptance. Some experts argue that the slope was still too gentle, only 15 to 20 degrees, for a spontaneous slab avalanche of sufficient force to cause such injuries, especially one that left the tent poles mostly intact and the structure relatively uncrushed. A truly impactful avalanche would typically flatten the tent entirely and shred its fabric more comprehensively.
The presence of footprints leading away from the tent suggests a more controlled, albeit panicked, exit rather than a frantic scramble from under a crushing snow mass, which would typically leave a chaotic jumble of tracks and a sense of extreme disarray. The fact that the tent poles were still mostly intact also works against a large avalanche scenario, as does the lack of significant snow accumulation directly on top of the tent. Furthermore, the timing of the panic and the subsequent injuries is hard to reconcile entirely with a single avalanche event. The scattering of the bodies, some attempting to return, others building a fire, suggests a prolonged, complex ordeal involving multiple stages of terror and decision-making, not just a singular, immediate event. The very cold conditions also meant the snow was not particularly wet or prone to typical avalanches, though wind slabs behave differently. And finally, the presence of radioactivity, though low, remains an unexplained anomaly if the event was purely natural, forcing proponents of this theory to dismiss it as extraneous or coincidental. Then there are the more esoteric theories, born from the sheer incomprehensibility of the incident, often venturing into realms beyond conventional science, where the limits of human knowledge are tested and stretched. These include the possibility of infrasound, sound waves below the range of human hearing, generated by unique wind conditions flowing over the mountain, particularly around the specific concave topography of Kholat Syakhl, creating a resonant cavity. Such waves have been hypothesized to cause extreme anxiety, nausea, dizziness, and disorientation in humans, potentially inducing a collective psychological breakdown that drove the hikers to flee in a panic, a shared hallucination, or unreasoning fear. The silent, invisible force, a hum so low it bypasses your ears and vibrates directly through your body, could certainly explain the immediate flight and the disoriented state, leading them to abandon their tent and seek escape from an invisible tormentor. While it could explain the panic, it cannot account for the severe physical trauma found on 4 of the bodies, such as crushed ribs and skull fractures, directly inflicted upon the victims, unless it led to a subsequent violent reaction or fall against a hard object in their panicked flight, which still doesn't fully explain the precise nature of the internal injuries without external bruising, remaining a partial explanation at best, requiring another element to account for the trauma. Another, more chilling theory, born from local Mansi folklore and the human tendency to anthropomorphize the unknown, involved the Yeti, the Russian equivalent of a Bigfoot, or some other large, aggressive, unknown creature, a mythical beast of the mountains. The Mansi people had legends of wild men of the woods or other powerful, unseen mountain spirits who guarded their sacred lands, and some locals suggested such a creature might have been disturbed. The idea here is that some unknown creature attacked the tent, driving the hikers out and inflicting the strange injuries, perhaps in a primal defensive act or an act of territorial aggression against intruders. While sensational and appealing to our deepest fears of the primeval unknown, there is absolutely no credible evidence for such a creature, or for large animal tracks near the site, or signs of a struggle consistent with a monstrous beast, no claw marks, no unusual animal remains. The primal fear of the unknown, of the things that lurk in the dark, would be ever present in such a wild landscape, yet remains unsubstantiated by any physical trace that could be definitively attributed to an unknown creature. Finally, there are the more fantastical notions, UFOs, alien encounters, interdimensional phenomena, or even military experiments involving extraterrestrial technology, pushing the boundaries of human understanding and popular imagination. The strange orange spheres reportedly seen in the sky by other hikers in the region around the time of the incident, though unverified and anecdotal, are often cited as evidence for an extraterrestrial involvement, suggesting that the group was either abducted or killed by otherworldly beings, perhaps their injuries being a byproduct of alien technology. While these make for compelling stories and fuel the imagination, they often no verifiable evidence and push the mystery into the realm of science fiction rather than historical investigation, relying solely on unconfirmed sightings and speculation. The silent, gliding movement of an unknown object, casting an eerie, otherworldly glow on the snow, is a potent image, but one without concrete physical proof that links it directly to the hiker's fate, leaving it firmly in the realm of conjecture. As you consider these various theories, feel the weight of their respective arguments and their flaws. Each one attempts to bring order to chaos, to impose a logical narrative on something that stubbornly resists explanation, revealing the deep human need for sense-making in the face of the absurd. The human mind craves answers, and in the absence of definitive ones, it creates its own, weaving together fragments of evidence with threads of imagination and fear, painting a mosaic of possibilities that may or may not reflect the truth. The air remains thick with unspoken questions, the quiet hum of an unresolved enigma, a subtle unease that lingers long after the sun has set, ensuring the story's enduring power and captivating grip. Just let yourself settle into the vast unknown, understanding that sometimes the answers remain just beyond our grasp, forever hidden within the silent, icy embrace of the mountains, a secret it holds close, defying all attempts to fully unveil it. Chapter 7. The Unresolved Echoes of Kholat Syakhl.
You are now in the present day, feeling the lingering chill of Kholat Syakhl, the dead mountain, as its name continues to echo through time, carrying the whispers of an enduring mystery. The Dyatlov Pass incident, 60 years on, remains one of the world's most enduring and perplexing cold cases, captivating minds across generations and continents, refusing to fade into history. Despite renewed official investigations, countless amateur attempts to solve it, and advancements in forensic science and analysis techniques, the core questions persist, a testament to the stubborn resilience of the unknown and the contradictory nature of the evidence that continues to defy a simple, unified explanation. The initial governmental secrecy, the tantalizing and horrific forensic details, and the sheer impossibility of the collective events have woven a shroud of mystery that seems unlikely to ever fully dissipate, maintaining its grip on the popular imagination and academic curiosity. The faint smell of aged paper from old case files, mixed with the crisp, clean scent of digital data, fills the air as modern researchers pore over decades-old evidence, seeking answers in the silence of time, hoping for a breakthrough where previous attempts have failed. In 2019, the Russian Prosecutor General's office, under significant public pressure and growing interest from media and independent researchers who kept the case alive, made the rare decision to officially reopen the investigation into the Dyatlov Pass incident. Their stated goal was to verify, once and for all, the avalanche theory, to bring a definitive end to the decades of speculation, and to provide some form of closure to the victims' families who had tirelessly campaigned for truth, yearning for a concrete answer. This was a significant development, a tacit acknowledgement of the lingering doubts surrounding the original 1959 conclusion and the public's continued fascination with the case. After extensive analysis, including sophisticated computer modeling of snow dynamics, forensic reenactments based on the original evidence and photographs, and expert testimonies from glaciologists, meteorologists, and medical examiners, they officially concluded in 2020 that a slab avalanche was indeed the cause of the incident. They proposed that a rare and specific combination of strong katabatic winds, downslope winds, and the unique concave topography of the mountain slope created a wind slab of snow, a hard, brittle layer of compacted snow that could detach as a single unit. This slab, unusually compacted and brittle, then detached and fell on the tent, causing the hikers to react quickly to escape. This unexpected event caused them to exit the tent in urgency and into the extreme cold, where they subsequently succumbed to the elements and other factors. The official explanation for certain missing soft tissues on some victims was attributed to post-mortem scavenging by local wildlife, especially after the bodies had been exposed to the elements in a ravine. The official report meticulously laid out the sequence of events, providing scientific rationales for each anomaly, aiming for a comprehensive and final explanation that could finally put the matter to rest. The sounds of scientific discourse, the quiet hum of data analysis, the confident pronouncement of experts trying to bring clarity to chaos, echoed through news reports, seeking to quiet the decades-long speculation that had surrounded the tragedy. This recent official conclusion aimed to provide a definitive answer, to finally close the book on the Dyatlov Pass, to offer a final, logical explanation rooted in natural phenomena that could be understood and accepted. And for some, particularly those seeking scientific rigor and a resolution free from the more sensational theories, it offered a measure of scientific, if still grim, resolution, a sense of intellectual peace. It felt like a deep breath, a collective sigh of relief, that a rational, natural explanation could finally be put forth, one that fit within the bounds of known physical phenomena and current scientific understanding, providing a seemingly plausible narrative. The argument was that the initial investigation was hampered by limited technology and political constraints, and that modern science could now provide the clarity previously lacking, using advanced simulations and expert knowledge to reinterpret old data. This perspective values scientific method and the pursuit of logical, verifiable answers above all else, seeking to demystify the event. However, for many others, including families of the victims, independent researchers, and seasoned Dyatlov incident enthusiasts, this official resolution still falls short, failing to fully satisfy the myriad of perplexing details that have fueled the mystery for decades. The doubts persist like the eternal snows of the Urals, clinging to every unresolved question, refusing to be melted by official pronouncements, a stubborn refusal to accept an incomplete truth. Critics of the slab avalanche theory point to several key inconsistencies that they argue remain unaddressed. Why were the bodies found so far from the tent, some attempting to return uphill, if a singular avalanche was the immediate cause of panic? The methodical, almost single-file footprints leading away suggest a more organized, albeit desperate, retreat than a chaotic scramble from under tons of snow, which would typically leave a jumbled mess of tracks and a sense of extreme disarray. Furthermore, the nature of the injuries, particularly the severe internal blunt trauma without external signs on Zolotaryov and Dubinina, remains a significant sticking point.
While a heavy snow slab could cause immense pressure, the complete absence of bruising or skin damage is still highly unusual and difficult to fully reconcile, leading some to argue it points to a pressure wave rather than direct physical impact or some other type of force that does not visibly mark the skin. Why was the tent not more extensively damaged, flattened, or buried if struck by such a force, especially if it was a wind slab capable of causing fatal injuries? Its relative intactness, aside from the internal cuts, remains a puzzle, defying the expected outcome of such a violent impact. And why, after decades of official silence and classification, did the authorities suddenly feel compelled to reinvestigate and offer an answer that still leaves room for ambiguity and persistent questions, raising suspicions about a convenient rather than conclusively proven explanation designed to finally close a sensitive file? The faint, persistent whisper of suspicion continues to mingle with the clean mountain air, an unsettling undertone to the official narrative that prevents true closure for many. The legacy of the Dyatlov Pass incident extends far beyond the lives of the 9 lost hikers. It has become a cultural phenomenon, a cautionary tale whispered around campfires and in hushed tones across generations, and a powerful symbol of the terrifying unknown that lurks in the wild, untamed corners of our world, a reminder of humanity's fragility.
It fuels countless podcasts, captivating millions of listeners, inspires documentaries, feature films and books, and generates endless online discussions across forums and social media, each attempting to unravel the knot of conflicting evidence and swirling speculation, contributing to its enduring mythos. The scent of old paper from archived documents, the faint glow of a computer screen in a darkened room, as countless individuals, driven by morbid curiosity or a genuine desire for truth, try to solve the riddle from afar, analyzing every photograph, every diary entry, every forensic report, often discovering new perspectives or reinforcing old doubts. It serves as a stark reminder that even with modern forensics, advanced understanding of natural phenomena, and unprecedented access to information, some mysteries stubbornly refuse to yield their secrets, defying easy categorization and remaining tantalizingly out of reach, a permanent enigma in human history that challenges our very notions of reality. The story of Dyatlov Pass is ultimately a story of human vulnerability in the face of an indifferent, powerful nature, whether that force was a peculiar avalanche, an unknown military experiment, or something else entirely. It is a story of courage and camaraderie, of young people pushing their limits, filled with idealism and an adventurous spirit, embarking on a journey of self-discovery and conquest, only to be met by an unimaginable force that tore through their carefully constructed reality, shattering their lives and leaving behind only unanswered questions, a profound and lasting tragedy. It asks us to confront the limits of our understanding, to accept that sometimes, even with all the evidence laid bare and all the theories explored, the truth can remain elusive, hidden behind a veil of ice and unanswered questions, a spectral presence in the vastness of the Ural Mountains, a permanent monument to the unknown, silently guarding its secrets. As you reflect on this journey, consider the quiet dignity of those 9 young lives, cut short in a manner that continues to defy explanation, their dreams abruptly ended in a landscape of bewildering terror. Feel the profound silence of the mountain pass, holding its secrets close, unyielding to our human need for closure, a silent guardian of its chilling truth, forever enshrined in its icy embrace.
The wind still howls across Kholat Shack, carrying faint echoes of a panic that erupted decades ago, a panic we can only imagine, a chilling reminder of the fragility of life and the immense power of forces beyond our control, a whisper that lingers in the air. Perhaps the true solace lies not in finding a definitive, universally accepted answer, but in acknowledging the enduring power of the unknown, and in remembering the adventurous spirit of those who dared to venture into the wild. Their legacy is not just one of mystery and horror, but of exploration, resilience, and the fragile beauty of life lived on the edge, a poignant reminder of the inherent risks and profound rewards of embracing the untamed world, and of the human spirit's unending quest for understanding. Just let the quiet contemplation settle over you, a gentle wave washing away the last traces of unease, leaving only a calm, peaceful understanding of the vastness of human experience, allowing you to drift peacefully into slumber, knowing some stories are meant to remain unsolved. So, as we bring our story to a close, remember the courage of the Dyatlov group, and the enduring power of the human spirit to seek answers, even in the face of the inexplicable. May your own thoughts now drift peacefully, unburdened by the mysteries of the past. Good night, wary traveler. Sweet dreams. Rest well.